My grandfather lifted his glass at my 28th birthday dinner and dropped a sentence that sliced the room open. "Claire, show me how you've used your $3 million trust fund after 25 years. The laughter around the table stopped mid-breath. Forks froze. Even the candles seemed to hold still. I felt every heartbeat echo in my ears as I whispered, "I never got one." Grandpa's smile faded. His lawyer stepped forward and set a thick stack of statements on the table with a heavy thud. And in that instant, before anyone spoke, I realized someone at that table wasn't supposed to be afraid, but they were. My name is Claire Monroe, and for most of my life I thought being the quiet one made things easier. Quieter daughters don't make trouble. Quieter daughters don't upset the balance, and in my family, balance meant pretending everything was perfect even when the foundation had been cracking for years. I lived in a small apartment in Seattle with my roommate Jade. She worked at a nearby coffee shop, always smelling faintly of espresso and cinnamon. She was the only person who ever saw how hard I worked late nights over my laptop freelancing to cover bills balancing UX contract work that came and went like the seasons. She'd joke that I functioned on coffee and sheer stubbornness, but she also knew the truth: I didn't have anyone else to fall back on. My parents, Elaine and Daniel, lived across the lake in Bellevue, in a house people would call aspirational. Perfect lawn, perfect seasonal wreath, perfect holiday displays, and inside a mother obsessed with control and reputation, a father who nodded through life to avoid conflict, and my sister Lily, who somehow always floated through the world cushioned by my parents' affection and their wallet. Growing up, Lily got the trips to the private school. The apartment paid in full so she could focus. Meanwhile, I was told independence would build character. When I needed help signing a lease because my credit history was too thin, my mother said, "We can't bail you out every time, Claire, every time," as if there had ever been a first. Still, I kept showing up to family dinners, birthdays, holidays. I kept trying because part of me held on to the moments Grandpa Arthur stepped quietly into my life. Soft smile, warm hands, patient voice. When I was 6, he walked me along the shoreline near the house and said, "One day, I'll make sure you're safe no matter what happens." It became a memory I clung to without realizing it was a clue. My 28th birthday dinner was meant to be simple but elegant, according to my mother. The restaurant had reserved a private room, glowing amber lights, white tablecloths, glassware, arranged like a catalog photo. Everything felt staged, like the family portrait we took every Thanksgiving, stiff, polished, slightly unreal. I arrived after work still in my trench coat hair, slightly wind-tousled from the Seattle breeze. My mother gave me a once-over, smoothing Lily's hair instead. Lily flashed me a smile, blissfully unaware of the undercurrent in our family. Dinner felt like every other holiday, Lily talking about her newest adventure, my mother beaming, my father sipping quietly, and Grandpa watching everything with an expression I couldn't read. I kept my posture steady the way I always did, focusing on cutting my food instead of watching their faces. I didn't know it then, but he was waiting for the perfect moment, waiting to drop a truth that would burn through 25 years of lies. If you'd asked me an hour before the explosion whether anything felt unusual, I would have said no. Everything at that table looked painfully normal. My mother correcting Lily's posture, my father pretending to read the wine label, Lily laughing too loudly at her own stories. But underneath it all, something had been shifting for months, and I had felt it like a low hum in my bones. Dinner started with the usual subtle jabs. Elaine commented on how resourceful I'd become in that tone she used when she wanted everyone to know she believed my life was a result of poor choices, not circumstance. "Claire's always been independent," she said, smiling at the couple seated beside us. "She never needed much from us." She said it like it was praise, but it hit me like a shove. Across the table, Lily twirled her bracelet, gold delicate, the kind of gift I'd never received. She launched into a story about her weekend getaway, a trip my parents had paid for. My father chuckled, adding, "She deserves it after working so hard." I blinked. Lily had been taking a break from school for months. I pushed my fork around my plate, reminding myself to breathe. But the flashbacks clawed up anyway. The time my car broke down on the highway and I begged my mother for help because I needed it to get to work the next morning. "You're an adult," she'd said flatly. Figure it out. I spent that night calling emergency tow services, maxing out a credit card I was still paying off. The semester in college when I couldn't afford textbooks, and asked if they could help with even a portion. "We can't keep bailing you out," she'd said. "It's not fair to Lily." Meanwhile, Lily's high school trip to Europe had been paid in full before she even packed a bag. Sitting at that birthday table, those memories didn't just resurface, they stitched themselves into a pattern I'd ignored for too long. Grandpa watched me quietly while the others chatted. He had always known when something was wrong, even when I tried to hide it. When the server refilled our glasses and the room grew a shade quieter, he lifted his wine. And then it happened. "Claire," he said gently, "why don't you tell everyone how you've used your $3 million trust fund after 25 years? The reaction was instant. Laughter, sharp, surprise, loud. Lily giggled, assuming it was some kind of joke. My mother's face flickered from confusion to panic to a stiff smile she pasted on like makeup. My father lowered his glass so fast it clinked against the table. I felt cold. Not the kind of cold that makes you shiver, the kind that hollows you out from the inside. "What trust fund?" I asked. Grandpa's smile faltered. "The one I set up for you when you were 3. My throat tightened, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. "I never got one." Silence crushed the room. Lily's smile fell apart. My father's jaw clenched. My mother stared at me like I'd spoken another language. In that suspended moment, I realized the truth wasn't just missing. Someone had taken it. The dinner didn't end, it simply cracked apart. One moment, everyone was frozen in their seats. The next chairs scraped, voices tangled, and the room felt too small to hold the lies spilling into the air. My mother was the first to recover. Her smile snapped back into place so fast it looked painful. "Dad," she said to Grandpa, her tone sugary and sharp, "I'm sure Claire misunderstood. She's always been distracted. You know how she is. Distracted." As if I had imagined 28 years of struggling alone. My father cleared his throat, eyes glued to his plate. Lily blinked repeatedly, trying to piece together a puzzle she never even knew existed. Grandpa didn't look at any of them. He looked only at me. "Claire," he said quietly, "meet me tomorrow morning. My office. 10 o'clock. It wasn't a question. And that terrified all of us. I walked out of the restaurant before anyone could stop me. The cold Bellevue air hit my chest like a fist, but I kept walking down the sidewalk, past the glowing windows, past families laughing and celebrating. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just kept replaying the same sentence over and over, the one I whispered like a confession I never got one. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking. My phone buzzed Jade. "How was dinner?" she asked. I opened my mouth and nothing came out. Silence told her everything. "Come home," she murmured. "Whatever happened, we'll sort it out." But deep down, I already knew. This wasn't something I could sort out. This was something that had been carefully hidden, meticulously buried. The next morning, I took the early bus into downtown Seattle. The city was still waking up, fog hugging the sidewalks, streetlights flickering out one by one. Grandpa's office was on one of the upper floors of a glass tower, quiet and warm, smelling faintly of cedar and old books. He was waiting for me in a leather chair, a folder resting on his knee. His expression wasn't angry. It was worse, disappointed. "I set up a trust fund for you when you were 3, he said. $3 million, meant to keep you safe, give you choices, free you from hardship." He paused. "You should have had access the moment you turned 18. My heart dropped. 18. I had spent that birthday working a shift at a grocery store. Why didn't I know about it? My voice cracked. Why didn't they tell me Grandpa handed me the folder? Inside was a preliminary audit, lines of withdrawals, transfers, payments, bills. Most recurring, many suspicious, all signed off by the same 2 names, Elaine Monroe, Daniel Monroe. My parents hadn't just hidden my trust fund, they had used it. For 25 years, mortgage payments, home upgrades, Lily's tuition, Lily's apartment, vacations, car expenses, luxury purchases, everything that had always been too expensive for me. I felt a burn rise behind my ribs, anger, grief, humiliation, realization twisting together in one violent knot. Every time I had worked 2 jobs, every time I'd begged for help, every time I'd swallowed the feeling of being forgotten, it hadn't been fate, it had been theft. Grandpa leaned forward. "Claire," he said, "I hired a legal team. My lawyer Collins will run a full audit, but I need you to decide how far this goes." I stared at the pages, at the small, neat signatures of the two people who were supposed to protect me. "I want everything I said, every record, every receipt, every dollar. I want the truth." Grandpa nodded once, slow and firm. "Then we'll ask them to come in for a meeting." "I want to be there," I said. "You will," he promised. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the quiet daughter or the forgotten one. I was the one walking toward the fire, and this time I wasn't the one who'd get burned. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon, the kind of cold Seattle day where the sky looked like brushed steel and the air felt heavy enough to press into your lungs. Grandpa insisted it take place in a private conference room inside his building neutral territory, he said. But the truth was he wanted every second of what was about to happen to be documented, witnessed, and impossible for anyone to escape. I arrived early. My palms were sweating despite the chill, but my steps were steady. Jade had hugged me before I left the apartment, telling me I looked like someone stepping into a courtroom and a rebirth at the same time. I wasn't sure what that meant until I saw my reflection in the elevator glass. My posture was straight, my face was calm, and my eyes held something I'd never seen in myself before: resolve. When the elevator doors opened, Colin stood waiting. Grandpa's lawyer looked exactly as he had the first time I met him. Tidy gray hair, tailored suit, and a stack of documents cradled under one arm like a quiet threat. He nodded as if he had already evaluated my emotional state and deemed it stable enough for what was ahead. "They're on their way," he said. I didn't ask who they meant. We both knew. Inside the conference room, Grandpa sat at the head of a long wooden table. His face was unreadable, but the tension in his jaw told me he'd barely slept. When he saw me, his expression softened just a fraction, but it was enough. He reached for my hand, squeezed it once, then released. "You're not alone today," he said. The door swung open. My parents entered first. Elaine walked quickly, shoulders stiff, face arranged in that familiar mask she used whenever she needed to appear blameless. Daniel followed, quieter eyes darting around the room as if looking for an exit. Lily came behind them, clutching her purse, her expression a confusing blend of worry and disbelief. She had been told there was a family issue that needed clarifying. No one had told her she was part of the issue. Dad Elaine began sharply, "I don't know what this is about," but dragging us into some formal, Grandpa held up a hand. "Sit." It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. They sat. Collins closed the door behind them, walked to the center of the room, and placed a thick stack of statements onto the table. The sound, a deep, unforgiving thud, seemed to echo off the walls. Lily flinched. My father swallowed hard. Elaine's eyes widened. "Those are your signatures," Collins finished. "Over 25 years' worth of withdrawals, transfers, and payments drawn from the trust fund intended solely for Claire Monroe." The room went silent. Then Collins began reading. Year 1, mortgage payments. Year 2, home repairs, kitchen remodel. He flipped a page. Tuition payments, not for Claire. Car expenses, travel expenses, credit card balances, apartment rent for Lily Monroe. With every word, something inside me unfurled. It wasn't joy. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was clarity. The kind of clarity you only get when you finally see a picture in full light instead of the shadows you'd been shown. My mother's face drained of color. "This is being taken out of context." Collins didn't blink. "The context is financial abuse of a beneficiary. The audit is complete." I stared at her, at the woman who had spent my entire childhood telling people I was too sensitive. She wasn't speaking to me. She was fighting for her image. My father finally spoke, voice thin. We used the money for the family. It wasn't personal." My laugh came out before I could stop it. Not personal. My hands trembled, but my voice stayed low, controlled. "When my car broke down and I begged you for help that wasn't personal, when I nearly dropped out because I couldn't afford textbooks, was that your idea of family?" He flinched like I'd slapped him. Elaine drew in a breath, chin lifting. "Claire, we always intended to put the money back when I snapped, when I turned 40, 50. Or never." Grandpa leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "You stole from a child." Her throat bobbed. "Dad, we had bills." "We all have bills," he said, "but not everyone steals from their own daughter to pay them." Lily finally spoke. "Mom, Dad, you used her money for my apartment, for my school." Her voice cracked. "Sweetheart," Elaine said shakingly, "we wanted you to have every opportunity, and I didn't," I whispered. Elaine turned to me, eyes brimming with a panic that wasn't remorse. "Claire, you've always been so independent. You never asked for much." I leaned in. "I didn't ask because you told me I couldn't. Because every time I came to you, you made me feel like needing anything was a burden." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of all the things they couldn't deny anymore. Grandpa tapped the table once firmly. "I am revoking your financial authority, effective immediately." Elaine jolted. "You can't do that." "I can," he said coldly. "And I have." Daniel sagged into his chair like the weight of 25 years had finally landed on him. Lily stared at the table, hands covering her mouth. Colin slid another set of documents toward me. "This," he said, "transfers full control of the remaining trust assets to you. Your parents' access is terminated permanently." Elaine's breath hitched. Daniel closed his eyes. Lily whispered, "Oh my God." My hand hovered over the pen. For a moment, I wasn't signing a document. I was signing a truth. I pressed my name onto the page. Elaine's chair scraped violently as she stood. "Claire, please, this will ruin us." I looked up at her, finally seeing her clearly. "Then maybe you shouldn't have built your life on money that wasn't yours." Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her legs shook. Daniel reached out to steady her, but his hand trembled too. They nearly collapsed. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet daughter holding the family together. I was the one tearing down the lie they built. When the meeting ended, the room felt hollow, like every lie had been scraped off the walls and left nowhere to hide. My parents walked out first, my mother trembling, my father guiding her with a hand that barely held steady. Lily lingered, staring at me with a mixture of guilt and something that almost looked like apology. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then finally whispered, "I didn't know, Claire." I nodded. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't anger either. It was a beginning. Over the next few weeks, everything shifted. Collins finalized the legal transfers. The remaining trust assets were secured in my name. My parents were notified of potential civil consequences if they attempted to interfere or conceal additional misuse. For the first time in their lives, they faced the weight of their choices without a shield. Grandpa visited me in my new condo, a modest place in Seattle, but mine, in a way, no space had ever been. He walked slowly through the rooms, touching the walls, smiling in small, quiet approval. "You deserve this," he said. "You deserved it all along." I didn't tell him I cried the first night I slept there, half grief, half relief. Grief for the family I never really had. Relief for the life I finally could build. I spent more time at the park by the water, letting the winter air clear what was left of the ache. I wasn't healed, not yet, but I wasn't drowning anymore. For the first time, the silence around me didn't feel like something stolen. It felt like something I owned. In the weeks that followed, I kept thinking about something Grandpa once told me when I was little, how safety wasn't just about being protected, but about knowing who stood beside you when truth finally surfaced. I understand it now. Family isn't defined by blood or last names. It's defined by honesty, by accountability, by the people who don't vanish when the truth is inconvenient. I don't hate my parents. I don't think I ever will. But I've learned that distance can be an act of love, love for myself, for the life I'm finally allowed to build, for the peace I refuse to surrender again. If you've ever had to step away from people who should have cared for you, I want you to know you're not alone. Your story matters. Your boundaries matter. Share your experience in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, follow the channel so you won't miss the next one.